You read the title. In this video, I'm gonna teach you how to get laid. No, I'm just kidding. Today I'm gonna teach you how to do quite the opposite. Today we're gonna be producing a full house track from start to finish. So we're gonna be, this is some nerd shit. This is gonna be a more unfiltered video. I'm gonna be showing you literally everything, my thought process behind each decision and so on. So here's the preview of what the track is gonna sound like. So the first thing I gotta address is my default template. So you'll notice here 3 different return tracks. I've just got this short reverb, which I'm going to be using for my drums most likely. This longer reverb, which I'm gonna be using for when I want a longer reverb. And then I've got this amp, which I'm going to be using to beef certain sounds up. On my master, I've got a limiter. This thing we'll get into later, maybe. And in my arrangement, I have arrangement markers set up every 16 bars. That way, it's just easier to orientate myself in the arrangement once we get into it. So, all right, that's the default template out the way. Now, in terms of actually producing the track, I have no fucking idea what I'm gonna make. So really, right now I'm in the stage of trying to find inspiration and find a vibe for the track. So I want to surprise myself. So this workflow involves clicking through shit a lot of the time. And I don't know, this caught my attention. You don't want to be overthinking this, so... yeah, right now I'm playing stuff on my MIDI keyboard. I don't know. Let's just put this down, just to I'm feeling really stiff. I feel like recording this video is a little bit too much pressure for me. So I think I need to just start putting something down. Oh, this is fucking trash. All right, let's look for something else. Let's go for the packs in Ableton. Like the factory packs are so goated. They've got some super weird shit. Alright, I don't know, let's put this in. Let's see if we can somehow fuck this up. Let's pitch it up. Yeah, I'm adding warp markers as well to just, I don't know, I want to come up with something super weird. Let's crank up the tempo a little bit. Let's try it with this sample. My workflow is a very heavily sample-based one. So you'll see me doing shit like this a lot of the time. Let's look for some different warp modes, maybe. All right, that's good enough for a start. Let's start with this. Okay. So this sample is apparently in E flat minor, as I can see from the name of the sample. So we can set the scale to E flat minor. Send it to a reverb. Let's actually copy this sample and paste it into a new MIDI track. And maybe we can play something in. You can see me increasing the send of the return tracks as well. Oh, and I forgot to mention the swing that I have. By default, I have the swing being applied to every new pattern that I'm making, because I just love the swing. I love when things are groovy. So I've got the swing Logic 16ths put on, and the global amount of the groove is set to 100%. So just keep that in mind, because without it, it would have been sounding like this. And that's with it. It's just a little bit more swung, a little bit more groovy. Might be a little bit hard to hear for the untrained ear, but no worries. Yeah. Let's add an auto filter to this thing. And I'm putting it in bandpass mode, so that I can then turn up the LFO amount. And add some filter sweeps. Let's set the mode to synced. Alright. Alright, maybe we can come up with this, with something for this bullshit that we added earlier. So the scale is in E flat minor. Yeah, we can play at a higher octave, maybe. And keep in mind that we're using a sample, which means that we need to make sure it's in key, it's actually in tune. So right now, when we are playing, let's play C, you know? So when we are playing C, it's actually giving us C as the note that's being played, as you can see in the tuner. That's because it by default is tuned to C, which is the default pitch of the sampler. If it was tuned to something else, we would have needed to transpose it up or down just to make sure it's actually playing what we want it to play. So yeah, that's good. Maybe we can create some chords out of this. Alright. Just experimenting here. Maybe instead we can try to create like a melody. Okay, with the echo sounds kind of decent. Oh shit, I forgot I'm fucking... Bro, I'm not even using this chord properly. This is an E flat minor sample, but I'm pitching it down by -9 semitones. Bravo me, goddamn. Alright, so in this case we are actually in a different scale. Let's count it. If we're pitching it, this is E flat or D sharp. If we're pitching that down by -9 semitones, then let's count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So apparently we are in F sharp minor. Actually, you know what? Let's just pitch the sample up. Yeah. Fuck it. Now it's actually an E flat minor. I wonder if we can pitch it down the second time around though. Oh, maybe not. Yeah, I still have no idea where this is going, honestly. I don't feel like I've created that vibe just yet. This stage of the production process is mostly about fucking around until you do find that vibe. That's an interesting sound. And this time it's pitched to A, so if I'm playing C, oh, see, it's actually tuned to A sharp, because if I'm playing C, then it's giving us A sharp, as you can see on the tuner. So we need to make sure it's playing what we actually want it to play. So to go from A sharp up to C, we need to go 1, 2 semitones up. So in the controls of the sample, we just transpose it up by 2 semitones. And now we play C on the keyboard, and we actually get C, which is good. So now, with knowing what we actually play, we can put down a proper pattern, which is gonna be in scale. Let's add some reverb onto this. Make the pattern longer. There's a very very long attack on the sample. Let's see if we can shorten it a little bit by changing where the sample starts from. Shit, could this be a bass? Maybe. And I want you to notice how I'm turning off certain elements at different times, because sometimes it's just a little bit overwhelming to have all of the ideas playing at the same time. And sometimes to properly experiment, we need to take some stuff away, you know? Alright, I'm gonna hold that idea of this being the bass, potentially, but I also want to experiment with something at a higher octave. Yeah, if we're gonna play at a higher octave, I'm gonna want to set the sample start time to be a bit earlier, so we get to keep this attack. And also, when I was turning this into a bass, I turned up the return track of the amp so that it becomes more beefy. So I can turn it down for the lead. Just trying to stick to the scale. And I'm also just experimenting, seeing what sounds good, which variations. Oh, you know what we should do? This is a very long sustained sample. So I think it would sound cool if we added a glide onto it. So in the controls of the sample, you can turn on glide mode. And when you play notes overlapping onto each other, they're gonna glide into each other. We can turn up the time of how long of a period it takes for them to glide to like 100 milliseconds. Oh, but after a while it runs out. So let's actually make sure it doesn't run out. So we can loop the sample. So the thing is, we want this to start from the very beginning, but in the middle somewhere here, we want this to loop. So let's set the end of the sample somewhere like here, and let's set the loop so that this is what loops without re-looping the start. We don't want that to happen, so let's just loop this. You can fade it for a more natural feel. Yeah, and now it's gonna be playing pretty much infinitely, so we can glide into each other with no problem. like that. But I like the movement from A sharp to E sharp, or I guess that's F. But I don't feel like it's really conclusive to have it at the end of the phrase. It feels like the story wants to keep being told. So maybe we can move it over like this. Just experimenting here. A little bit blindly. I feel like this last note wants to go down somewhere. No, not here. Not here. Ooh, that's where it wants to go, yeah. So that's interesting. We got a movement from A sharp to E sharp to A sharp again. But just at the lower octave. I wonder, could we do something like this? Nah. Okay, maybe you can start from D sharp. Okay, you know what? I actually don't want the long attack to be a thing. So I'm gonna set the start time from where it's already in. And see, my workflow is very heavily reliant on samples. So you can see we turned the exact same sample, this Capri Mini organ A2, whatever, into vastly different sounds. This is a bass with a very unique character, by the way. And this is just like a lead. So things can change very heavily depending on the types of effects you put on them. Like for the bass, I put the amp return track on it. And also I played it at a much lower octave. And you know, the results I get are crazy. And no one else has these sounds. Like, I don't think many people in the world have thought of turning Capri Mini Organ A2 V3 from Ableton's Factory Pack, Lost and Found, into a fucking bass sound, right? So you get very unique combinations of sounds as a result of that. Let's see if our other stuff still fits with what we have. Okay, it kind of does. Alright, we might be starting to get closer to that vibe that I was talking about. We're leaning towards something dreamy and mysterious. Yeah. you know? But there's something interesting. Because this bass pattern that I've made is only 2 bars long. And it's kind of just some random keys that I, like a random progression of notes that I chose, played in a cool rhythm. But this lead creates a slower progression, which I want to experiment. I want to experiment with turning the bass into something like this, but maybe it was just like a rhythm to it. So I'm gonna Command D to duplicate. So we have this for later if we want to come back to it, but I want to experiment if I just follow the root notes of this. So the first one is D sharp. You can just copy the, yeah, you can just copy the rhythm. Okay, and I'm gonna duplicate the pattern, bam, and just pitch this up to A sharp, because that's the second root note in our progression. Okay. Let's duplicate again. The next root note is E sharp, and the last one is A sharp, but an octave lower. Work. I'm not exactly sure. Let's experiment a bit more, maybe with adding some octave jumps here and there. Maybe here. Let's turn this off. Oh, that's too intense. Oh, we haven't added the glide to the bass. Let's do that. The bass can glide as well. Yeah, 100 milliseconds or so. That's usually the sweet spot that I like. Yeah, and now when we overlap notes onto each other, they're gonna glide in a pretty cool way. Yeah. Feel right anymore. That's weird. Okay, that's cool. Let's compare it to the version we had before. You know, I like both, to be honest. Maybe let's stick with this one. Let's just add some variations to it. Some rhythmic variation. This is interesting. Let's start feeling the pulse, you know. I want to add a kick. I'm gonna add one of my kicks from my own personal sample library. So over the years, I've been, you know, just accidentally even coming up with different sorts of sounds as I was making tracks. So this led me to create I was just exporting them into my own sample pack, and now I have these personal sounds all to myself, so I can come back to them and reuse them, and it's really nice. That's cool. Let's add a compressor onto the bass so we can sidechain it. Set it to peak mode for it to be more snappy. Okay, so now we have this bass side chain to the kick. And we can copy the same side chain onto some other elements in our track, like this lead. This lead. I'm gonna EQ this pad. Make it quieter maybe. Cut the lows from it, maybe the highs as well, because I want it to be more as a complementary thing. I don't want it to be so in your face. Hear some fucking hi-hats being added to this. We could be getting somewhere. Alright, let's do that. Let's add the hi-hat real quick from my sample library again. This is something you should be doing. Export your own sounds so you can reuse them. this pattern, and I'm just gonna make it more rapid. Add some shaker accents here and there. Pitch it up, maybe? Nah. Let's add another layer of the hi-hat, perhaps. And I'm adding these in separate channels so that I can, for example, at one point in the arrangement, introduce this first hat, and only then layer on this one. You get me? That way I have more venues where I have more opportunities to, or more ways, I should say, to manipulate the energy of the track. You know, the listener is gonna feel when this hi-hat gets taken out, for example. Right, so let me just sort the project real quick. I'm gonna color these in a way that makes sense for me. So usually my kick and bass, I put them at the top of the track, my drums at the bottom, and all of my synths I have in between them. Right, and here let's try and create some sort of question and answer within the drums. I'm gonna add a bunch of hats. So I'm adding this first one to this new MIDI track, and I'm gonna group this to drum rack, to the drum rack. I'm gonna add a bunch more hi-hats. Yep, just a bunch of weird ones with different characters to them. Maybe some of them we can pitch around. Yep. So now we have a bunch of opportunities or possibilities for creating a hat pattern. So I want to create a question and answer here. So what I'm literally going to do right now is just fucking click around, experiment, and see what sounds good. And remember, a lot of the work is being done by the groove, like the swing on the pattern. So if I turn it off, it doesn't sound anywhere near as cool. Let's turn it back on. Actually, you know what? Let's start with a shorter pattern. And let's duplicate this and just try and add some variation instead. Instead of, you know, this is a very common thing for me. where it's just intimidating to fill out the entire pattern if it's like, I don't know, it depends on the instrument, but if it's like super long, like imagine trying to fill out an entire 8-bar loop pattern with unique variations of hi-hats every single time. Like that's just intimidating, right? So I usually tend to start with a shorter pattern, and then once I have that and it sounds decent, I just duplicate it so that I can add little variations and switch ups the second time around, instead of, you know, reinventing the wheel. So the way I go about adding variations is just move stuff around, turn some things off, turn some notes off. Actually, let's turn some things off so you can hear this better. Yep, that's cool. Now let me just EQ these hats. Just take out the lows from them, maybe. Just make them less intense. You know, I want to try adding a shifter onto these. Oh, not this shifter. Whoops. I want to try adding a shifter onto these hats. So that they're gonna become more like an element in the mids. Maybe. Because I'm setting the shifter to frequency mode and pitching it down. So. Yeah. Alright. Okay, just renaming my stuff to stay organized. Okay, let's also add some sort of rim shot or like a clap thing. I like using rim shots recently. I'm just into that. So putting it on every second downbeat. Let's set the sample to one-shot mode. Oh, it doesn't make a difference, all right. You know what? I'm gonna command the G to group this into an instrument rack so that I can layer a bunch of different rim shots together. Alright, that's cool. So now let's add some variations to this rim shot pattern. Duplicate. And let's duplicate again. And now we can add little shits like these. Yeah, that's cool. Let's duplicate that again. Again, we're using this button a lot, as you might be able to notice. Adding more and more different variations. Yeah! I like that. So the vibe is starting to come together, you know? We kind of know what we're going for now. Before I was clueless. I had no idea where this is going, but now we kind of know. And when you get tired of some things, you know, because it's a little bit unhealthy to just work in the loop non-stop like that. You keep hearing the same shit over and over again, and it just drills into your head, and you start to get sick of it. So it's a really good practice to occasionally turn some things off and then back on, just to imagine how things would sound like when you're actually in the arrangement. Very underrated workflow tip right there. Okay. But now I want to try expand the instruments a little bit more, because I feel like we still don't really have enough to justify going into the arrangement just yet. So I'm going to add a new MIDI track right here, and I'm going to copy this mini organ sample again. Actually, could we layer it with this? Would that sound cool? Let's Command G to group it, and let's paste it in here. Let's make it louder. I don't know, it doesn't make much of a difference, but it's chill, I suppose. But yeah, let's see if we can make some chord stabs out of this. So, we can't have the glide thing anymore if we want to create chords, because the glide makes it so that we can only play one note at a time. We're gonna go back to being polyphonic, not monophonic. So let's turn the glide off. And now we can play multiple notes at the same time. So I'm just gonna go for the brain dead thing of, you know, seeing what the root note of my scale is and putting a chord on top of that. And if you don't know how to build chords, you can just follow the scale. You can press this button in here and put a note every other note. So you skip one note, you add one note, you skip one note, you add one note. That's the most brain dead way to make chords, and it's super simple. And that way we come up with a minor chord for this scenario specifically. Yeah, I'm trying to add rhythm to it. What if we added a note on top like this? If we inverted the chord? Nah. All right, you know what? Instead of doing that bullshit, let's add an auto filter. And let's try and automate some filter sweeps. So let's go like this. I'm just looking at the MIDI pattern, seeing when the chord stabs happen. And just experimenting, seeing what sounds good. You know what? Let's just duplicate this first thing over. In a minor scale, there's multiple places where you can build a minor chord from. So we could go, for example, to the 5th note of the scale. So is that right? I think that's right. Or the 4th. Anyways, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's the 4th. So I'm pitching everything up by 5 semitones, and it's still in the scale. But I don't really like how it sounds, so we can go back. Maybe just one. Okay. That's better, yeah. Let's make it happen much more sparsely. So duplicate. And just this last one. This one maybe you can turn off. Yeah. Let's add some sort of pad. Okay, I'm gonna be spamming this sample, bro. You know, the cool thing about using the same sample to create different elements in the track is that everything just kind of fits together in terms of the sound, because you're using the same thing and you're just tweaking it in a way that makes sense for that specific instrument that you're trying to create. So I'm gonna try, let's create just a simple chord like this. Let's make it longer. Maybe we can add some decorative notes on top, so that's a 7th chord. Maybe a 9th chord. I really like using the 9th chord, because you'll see that when, yeah, the way you build it is you just skip note, skip note, skip note. I did that the other way around, but yeah, skip note, skip note, skip note. That's the 7th chord. Skip note, that's the 9th chord. And the cool thing about the 9th for a minor chord is that when you pitch it down an octave, you'll see there's a lot of dissonance here. These notes are right next to each other. And that, I don't know, I fucking love that sound. It just sounds edgy, you know? So this could be a static atmosphere in the background of the track. Let's make it sound like it should be in the background, so it's not too in your face. So I'm gonna EQ out the lows, the highs, make it way quieter. And in my opinion, the right volume for a string pad sort of sound like this is to the point where you don't consciously notice it, but when it gets taken away, you do notice that something is not there anymore. It shouldn't be too in your face. It should be like the fucking AC in your car. Like you turn it on and you forget that it's on after like 5 minutes. But when you remember and turn it back off, you feel this sudden silence that wasn't there before. You know what I mean? I hope this is making sense. That's a fun metaphor right there. Let's add the sidechain onto the atmosphere as well. Maybe turn down the dry wet a little bit. All right. Let's sort this project a little bit. So I'm putting the atmospheric elements right next to each other. Cool. Let's color them a similar color. This is our lead. We're definitely going to be using that. Cool. This is like an atmospheric lead. Whatever. As long as I know what it is. These are the chord stamps. Okay. Oh, and this thing we're not even using anymore. Sometimes that's gonna happen, bro. You experiment, and some shit you're just not gonna end up using because it's trash and it doesn't even fit the direction that the track ended up going in. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So let's get rid of it. Yeah, we don't need it. So the beautiful thing about having multiple like hook-ish elements in your track is that in the arrangement, which you will see in a second, you will be able to switch between them. So we can have this as the main focus of the track, and then it just switches to this. So there's gonna be a question and answer on the level of the arrangement, which I really love to do that because it sounds cool as fuck. Also, let's just give one last chance to this bass pattern. For some reason, this doesn't sit right with me anymore. Maybe something entirely different. Okay, I want to give this a chance. Maybe I will use it at some point in the arrangement, so I'm going to just put it here. Because it sounds cool, you know, and I think there definitely could be a place for this. And now that we kind of have an idea of what this track wants to be, we have the vibe, we have a couple elements that we can switch between. Now we can start moving into the arrangement, slowly but surely. So let's do that right now. The workflow for that is very simple, actually. And our arrangement markers are going to be helping us a lot. I've placed them down every 16 bars. And the rule of thumb is that you want to have a change happening every 8 bars or so. So that's 8 bars. So in these markers, we have 2 8-bar phrases. So we can keep that in mind. This is going to be a visual aid for us. But in terms of how you arrange, you just do this. You drag out elements in the track as you listen to it, and you see what sounds good. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Nope. This out spontaneously. Yeah, the atmosphere should be introduced more gradually, I think. So I'm adding an auto filter and automating it to be slowly opening up. I usually want to start with like a pretty bare bones drum intro, so it's easier for the DJs to mix it in. How the bass comes in. Let's just make it more gradual as well. So I'm adding an auto filter, which is in low pass mode, cutting the highs away, so we can kind of have only the subby frequencies of the bass introduced at the very beginning. this is the trick. Ideally, you would want to be arranging shit in as real time as you possibly can, because that way you're just more spontaneous with it, and you go fast, you know, and you make the decisions based on how the arrangement feels rather than how you think it should look like, you know, visually. You just hear the arrangement play out, and your imagination is gonna tell you, oh, it would be cool if we added the break right there. It would be cool if we added the lead right there. That's what was happening right there when I was arranging the track. That's the workflow you should be trying to have, ideally. You know, this definitely takes practice to get right, but it's what you should aim for. And yeah, as you can see, changes happening every 8 bars. I'm not reinventing the wheel. Every 8 bars, something is changing. The energy is building in the intro so far. And here we have this improvised breakdown. And then we can kind of see where that takes us from there. As it currently is, this breakdown lacks contrast. Contrast is a very important word that you can hear me say pretty often when it comes to arranging music. So there's no contrast because look at the drums. They're playing before the breakdown, during the breakdown, after the breakdown. Nothing is changing. There's no contrast, and there's no story being told. So we need to be thinking in terms of that. So how do we increase the contrast? We can take some shit out. Let's take out some drums, perhaps. Maybe not these ones, maybe later. Alright, you know what? I'm starting to think that maybe we could rethink this. So let's try, if we, instead of this thing, we introduce that thing. More slowly, please. However, filter. Yep. Yep. I can't even hear these pads. Let's turn them off. I think I want to make sure that this lead thing really only gets introduced during the breakdown. We can try that. So let's filter it in using auto filter. And there's also a really cool trick with the reverb I can show you. Ooh! Wait, I just got this... Fuck. I'm sorry, man. My workflow is chaotic, but it's really how it is sometimes. But I just got this idea. What the fuck if we put this bass pattern from earlier and put it at our first drop? So this could be like this stripped down version, apparently, of the bass. And then we go into the real thing. I kinda like that. Alright, we can get into that in a second, but I was gonna show you this reverb trick for this breakdown. So basically, if you automate the decay time of the reverb to go up, up and up and up and up, like 15 seconds even, or 19. What happens is that you create this feeling of a wall of noise being built up over the breakdown, and then it just suddenly comes back to clarity here. And slightly unrelated, but I feel like we could use some more variation in this actual pattern, because it's just the same thing over and over. So let's duplicate, as always. Let's maybe add some rhythmical variation. Let's add some more variations on top of that. I'm just trying stuff out right now. After the 16 bars of this drop, we can switch to something different, like these chord stabs. And I tried dragging them out, but it didn't quite work out as expected because it doesn't have the automation of the filters. So, excuse me, let's just make sure we copy that over. Let's feel that change happen. Maybe instead of taking away the pad, we can take out this Atmos lead. also feel like we don't really have enough hats in the track. Let's add some rides. So with the rides, it's very simple how you go about this. You just put down a pattern which is very short, like this. And you make the first one quieter. Let's EQ it out. So just to make sure no lows are interfering with our bass. There's also sometimes some resonant frequencies in the rides, so we can just EQ them out like this. All right. Going from the ride to the rim in the drums also gives a lot of contrast. So that's a very useful tip you can use. Taking something out and then adding something in. A lot of contrast. It's a musical moment you can copy and paste and use in a ton of different ways. And then once you take the rim shot away, or like the clap, taking it away is a very powerful thing to do in the arrangement. Like the difference with or without the clap, just it's huge. It makes the drop feel much more sparse and empty. I think after this much time of the drop is like it's enough to go into our second breakdown. We've had some fun. This is 32 bars, and now we can create our second breakdown. All right. We could be onto something. Right now I'm really just drafting stuff out. I'm not really focusing too much on the finer details that much in this stage of the process, but I'm just really mapping out the rough draft of the arrangement to get a skeleton down, get out of the loop as soon as I possibly can while the ideas are still fresh in my head. And I'm just focusing on where the blocks are, as well as the arrangement, filter automations. So, or like automations in general. That's really the only thing I'm focusing on. Yeah. So let's play it back again. So far, so good. I don't feel like the whirly piano really has a place anymore. Maybe you should just fucking delete it. Even though this is the sound that we started with. You know, sometimes this just happens. Bye-bye, Mr. fucking whirly piano. Let's try without the rim shot. I like that. I like that. You know what else we should add? We should add an open hat as a layer. Something like this. So I can literally just copy the pattern from our other hats. You know, because I want this just to be an additional layer. That we can bring in and out of the arrangement at different times. I like it here, I think. Alright, here when we're adding the Atmos lead back in, I think we can add it in a more gradual way. Yeah, and this is the breakdown moment. We can cut away the kick right before this happens to kind of anticipate it. We're definitely gonna be wanting to add some effects here, potentially. You know what? I think I just didn't add enough hi-hats in the first place in the composition. Might want to add some loops. Let's see if we can find something that adds. Feeling to the loop. I think I want to find some shakers. Something like this-ish. Yeah. Let's just cut the lows from these shakers. So in the breakdown, we're keeping the shakers playing. And we are reintroducing the lead melody. Let's do it more slowly. And this bass, let's add. We don't want it to be constantly fully in. The bass keeps playing, but we want to filter it out over time. So I'm adding an auto filter in high pass mode, which is cutting the low frequencies away. And let's do something like this. Okay, that's cool. I'm thinking we could do the same thing for this breakdown here. So the taking away of the bass isn't too abrupt. We can gradually take it out. Okay, and so usually the structure goes like this of the arrangement. The intro, we increase the energy gradually, establish the scene of how the track is going to sound like. Then the first breakdown, which is pretty basic. Then the first drop, where we play around with some of the hooks, we have some fun. Switch the attention from one element to another, so on and so forth. Take some drums out, add some drums in, shit like that, right? So it's the first drop. And then the second breakdown, usually it's much longer and much more intense than the first one. So this second breakdown can sometimes be a bit more epic. And yeah, I'm picturing something like 32 bars long in terms of the length for it. And I really like using the labs sometimes. Labs is literally one of the only third-party plugins that I use. You've probably noticed I've been using just Ableton stock plugins, and Labs is just free, and I love them because they have actually some great sounds, and they don't require me to install an external fucking launcher for for the plugin to work properly. So there's some great packs you can access for free. And I like the piano. You know, there's the soft piano, which I really love. So we can take the bass progression that we've made. Let's create a new pattern. and I'm pasting the chord progression of the bass. I just want to extend out the notes and make sure we don't have these accent notes anymore. We don't need that. So now we have the root notes of the bass. And we basically want to build chords on top of this. So you've already seen me explain how to build chords if you're an idiot. I mean, if you're not an idiot, then this is still helpful, but it's just a simple way to think about it. Like when you're looking at notes in the scale, skip, note, skip. That's the formula to build chords on top. And you know, this is gonna probably sound basic, maybe not quite right, but after this we can just experiment. Yeah, let me shift the octave up higher. So now that we have this basic chord progression, we can switch it up a little bit. So for example, we can add some inversions. Or maybe add some decorative notes on top. I like adding the dissonant ones. You just gotta experiment, to be honest with you. Right, maybe this last chord we can switch up a little bit. Oh, what's going on with my mouse? Right. Something like this-ish. Let's try slowly adding some hats back in to start building the energy of the track. What if we fucking made this more and more intense? Like, let's add a duplicate layer of the lead, but just pitch it up an octave. and have that slowly be added on top of what we already have. Alright. Damn, maybe this could be an even longer breakdown. Yeah, let's start slowly reintroducing the bass, perhaps. And contrast it up by taking shit away just before the drop actually hits. Let's add a bunch more drums on the actual drop. Okay. All right, more contrast, you know, we're making sure that the addition of the pads is or like we're manipulating the pads intentionally, so we're taking them out before the drop actually happens, and then we're adding them back in on the drop. We could either do that or the other way around, where it would be playing in the breakdown but not on the actual drop. But I think this sounds better. See how spontaneous that was? I just heard that in my head. I imagined taking the lead away and thought it would sound good. Yeah, that's cool. Nice, nice. Let's keep that going. Drag these out further. Take out the open hat. Alright, alright, alright. start filtering out the bass to really go into the outro. Just strip the energy of the track down. Oh fuck. What's going on with my mouse? For some reason I'm double clicking for no reason. We can slowly introduce this pad back in, and then just as we go into the outro, slowly have it be taken back out. Alright, I think we can just like add a small little double kick thingy. And that can be the end of the track. Scratch that, let's not add the pad in here. Alright, that's cool. So that's like the rough skeleton draft of the arrangement done. We've got 5.5 minutes in terms of how long the track is. Let me just label some of these things properly. Right now I'm just listening to see how the arrangement really feels like in context of listening to the whole thing, to see if there's any changes I want to make. Okay, we might want to add a riser there. This feels really good though. I love this part. Alright, this is definitely too sudden. We want to either add a riser into the piano to announce it a bit better, or just introduce it more gradually. You know what? I'm just gonna do this quickly. I'm gonna add an auto filter onto these shakers. Make sure that in this part they're getting introduced a bit more gradually. I think that sounds good. More drums. Yeah, the lead needs more contrast here. Somehow. Because I don't like how the lead keeps playing all throughout here and then just keeps playing like nothing ever happened. Something should be changing here. Okay, that's nice. Okay. I also had this idea really quickly. I don't know. Let's try it. Like, what if we just nah. Nah. Maybe in the outro. Yeah, we can do that in the outro. Change the bass pattern to the simpler one from the beginning. Let's add some more contrast to emphasize that change though. Yeah, we should add some switch up to really, like at this moment specifically, just to really fucking yeah, something like that. Yeah, something different to kind of justify the change from this pattern to that pattern, you know, like a bridge in between. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. So now let's go through the shit that we wrote down for ourselves. Riser. And by riser, I mean specifically really just a riser ideally made out of this lead so that it feels like we're reversing, we're swelling into that lead, you know? So I'm gonna Command T to create a new audio track, and I'm gonna set it to get audio from the lead. Boom, just like this. And now I can arm this track and record it. So that now I have this in an audio track. Let's take just this first snippet. And now we can add a reverb onto that. 100% dry wet, super long decay, no high cut. So that then we can freeze this. Boom. And now we can reverse it. So let's hear how that feels. Yeah, let's make it, let's fade it in and make it like happen just before the drop hits. What if we add some silence? To really surprise the listener, that could be something. So the shortcut for that is like once you select a certain amount of time, you can Command I, and then it just creates this gap. Okay. This could kind of take you by surprise. You don't expect it to be just like this half a second longer. Alright, let's roll with it. Whatever. Alright, the next thing that we had on our list was the riser for this fucking piano. By the way, you probably can notice that if you're OCD like me, this is gonna piss you off. But these are slightly off the grid now because of the Command I thing that we did by inserting this little bit of silence. We're just gonna have to deal with that, man, honestly. It's a good thing we have the arrangement markers though, because they can tell us where exactly the changes are. You know, we can add a bunch more just to be really spot on. Yeah, because we want to keep track of the 8-bar phrases still. But yeah, let's add this riser with using the same technique to the piano. So we are basically creating a new audio track under it. setting it to get audio from this labs thing, because that's what we want to record. Then you arm the track, record. That's enough. Now you can reverb it up. Bounce this track in place. And now you take that audio and you reverse it. Simple as that. So that way it's a bit less sudden. I think that's an improvement. I think I also want to take some hats away before this change actually happens, for more contrast. Maybe take this out. You can reuse these risers at any point as well. If it sounds cool. Ooh, you know what? We should start reintroducing the bass from here. What if we Command Shift X to remove all of this entirely, just to warp it together, and shorten the breakdown so it's a bit more concise. And yeah, that way. Oh yeah, I fucked up a little bit. It's hard to tell what's even going on because of the fucked up warp markers now, but I think we can shift over everything by these 8 bars. So let's select this much time, Command Shift X, and just before here, let's replicate this sort of cutting away of all elements for contrast. Boom. And let's see how that feels. I think that's better. However, I need more contrast for the leads. What if we take out the +12 lead at the drop? It's kind of better, actually. Nice. Yeah, it's a pretty good arrangement, actually. I'm quite happy with how this turned out and how quickly it turned out. There you go. We speedrun an entire house track from start to finish. Let's do a playthrough of the track.